Okay, let's bring in Sami Hamdi. He's editor-in-chief of International Interest, a current affairs analysis magazine. He joins us from our offices in London. Sami, welcome back to the NewsHour. In a story of strange circumstances, for you, what's the strangest component to this?
I think the strangest component is how somebody like Jamal Khashoggi, a man who publicly defected from Saudi Arabia, went to the US, secured a column at one of the world's leading papers, the Washington Post, one that is read by millions around the world, and decided to criticize the Saudi newspaper, the Saudi government in the Washington Post, thought under any circumstances that it was wise to enter any Saudi institution building, any Saudi embassy. This is beyond belief. This is baffling. Any political exile will tell you that you do not go near the country that you're running away from, whether it's their territory, their embassies. Putting that aside, what I will say is that this is not a new tactic that Saudi Arabia has used, or indeed other Arab countries have used, in terms of luring people into embassies or kidnapping them, and nobody ever hears from them again. I think the difference with Jamal Khashoggi this time is that he is very high profile. In the past, it has happened to Saudi princes, for example, who have defected from the family or acted as dissidents. In the past, it's been low-profile journalists, for example, making investigations into corrupt practices. But it's never really been, at least as far as I can remember, somebody as high-profile as Jamal Khashoggi. What's even more interesting about this particular story is, how do you prove it? Jamal Khashoggi is a Saudi citizen. He doesn't have, or as far as I know, another passport. But even if he does, he has the Saudi citizenship. Usually political exiles, they would only enter an embassy or have the confidence to do so if they had another passport, whether it's a UK passport or US, preferably. We always make a joke that these two passports always protect political exiles. However, the reality is he's a Saudi citizen who went in. In other words, who's going to take up the responsibility for proving whether he is dead or not? He's a Saudi citizen. The Saudi government will be the one, logically, that has to take measures in order to prove it. But how do you demonstrate that Jamal Khashoggi is gone?
Okay.
Moreover,
just to
when you
pick
look
up,
at the
just
international
interrupt you for a second,
Sorry.
Sami, and to pick up on the point that Jamal was making to us from Istanbul there, or extrapolating out a point that he was making. If, wrapping this next question up in a big health warning, because they are just clearly allegations at the moment and claims and counterclaims, if you're the Saudis, what does it say about the mindset of the Saudi government and the Saudi royal family at the highest level if you feel emboldened enough to carry through on something like this in a consulate, in effect, an embassy in another country, given the backstory of the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Turkey?
I think we have to be careful how we discuss the narrative of Turkey and Saudi Arabia. I do not buy the narrative that Turkey is tiptoeing around Saudi Arabia. They have many issues that they are really against each other. Saudi has demanded that Turkish troops withdraw from northern Iraq. They're against each other on the Qatar blockade. On Syria, Saudi no longer has a significant say. The Turks are involved there. And if you talk to Turkish officials, they've long given up hope that they can have any reasonable relationships with the Saudis who continue to suspect them. So I think with regards to this diplomatic front, I don't think the Turks are considering what is the best way to minimize it. I think they are thinking, what is the best way to use this opportunity? This is a chance for Turkey to demonstrate it is not an anti-human rights country. They can make Khashoggi into a martyr in terms of really applying pressure to the Saudis. But the key issue is this. Why does Saudi Arabia feel that it is capable of doing so in Turkey? Because Donald Trump is not going to do anything. When we talk about the international community, history shows that if the US is not interested, the international community is not interested. I was hearing earlier the UN rapporteur speaking to you earlier. Even he couldn't dictate what kind of measures might be imposed because he doesn't know. Because the first stage is, what will the US do? Donald Trump is not going to get involved in this. And it is Donald Trump's presence in Washington that gives Saudi Arabia the, I don't want to say the word courage, but I'm lost to find a better word, or the audacity to conduct these various different foreign policy stances, such as the Qatar blockade, kidnapping Khashoggi, or the like. So I think with regards to the relation between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, I don't think Turkey is too keen doesn't take into regard whether it's upset Saudi or not. It doesn't mind upsetting Saudi. The problem is, how do you deal with it? How do you prove it? And what can you possibly get out of Saudi Arabia by placing pressure on Jamal Khashoggi?
Okay, here's the thing. You were talking there about if you prove it, how do you prove it? If it is proved, or if the assumption is so great in effect, to operate as proof or having been proved, what does that then do to the relationships that operate within the context of what we think might have happened and also the broader context of across the region relationships? Because at least you're talking about ambassadors being expelled, embassy staff being sent home.
I think you're applying the Western value system with regards to the value of journalists and the value of human integrity and dignity. This is the Arab world. This is a whole different playing field. I mean, Khashoggi is not the first journalist to disappear. He's not the first journalist to be killed either. In Algeria, one was killed not too long ago. In Tunisia, it used to happen under the Ben Ali regime. Libya, it was renowned. This is not the first time. This is why we need to remember Khashoggi is not the first case. He is perhaps the most high-profile case. This is the rules of the game. If you're expecting some grand diplomatic response, just look at the international community. Do we think that Turkey is going to take hardcore measures of expelling ambassadors when only the Canadian foreign minister is the only one to come out really and condemn Saudi Arabia? When the US is silent, when Europe tends to be taking a cautious step, we demand maybe an investigation and that's it. What are we really expecting here? The reality is Turkey is also part of this world. It knows the rules of the game. This is Khashoggi. Is Khashoggi worth causing all of this fuss and all of this chaos over just because he got killed? At the end of the day, he's a Saudi citizen, he is an Arab, and in this world, that blood tends to be quite cheap. This is the reality of it, and I say this as an Arab myself. So I think we should be aware what value standards we're applying here. In terms of how it will go, they will probably wait until the media attention dies down, and then Khashoggi will probably be considered one of those that we bring up as an example of journalists who are being silent. But he's not a US or UK citizen or Western citizen. I don't think there will be that many procedural implementations in response to Jamal Khashoggi's disappearance.
Sami Hamdi, as ever, a pleasure. Many thanks.